welcome back to Soundfreq episode 4. We have made it. We're finally here. We're at the 4th episode, and today I have the unrequited pleasure of being joined by Russ and Ross from Signum Audio. Welcome to the show, guys.
Nice to be here.
Cheers.
Well, it's lovely to have you here. So let's kind of jump into it. Who are you? Why are you here?
We are Signum Audio. We're here because Sam asked us to come on and talk a little bit about what we do in terms of plugin development and workflow optimization and dynamic audio.
Absolutely. Signum Audio is pretty well known in its kind of arena. You guys obviously focus on kind of dynamics and post-production. Can you tell us a bit about your kind of background as a company?
Yes, so I'll take that one because I've been with Signum Audio sort of handling the development of the business and the kind of bringing the products to market side of things since we started in 2017. Time has flown since then. But we, the two guys who started the company originally worked for a AAA games company developing audio systems to create titles such as Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption 2, which went on to win some audio awards. But they eventually sort of decided that they wanted to bring their prowess in plugin development and create tools for the wider market to get people creating better audio, we hope. So yeah, we started creating plugins, starting out with our Butte range of tools back in 2017 for post-production, and we've recently moved into tools that deal more with music creation with our Sky line of products.
Yeah, we actually I don't know if you know this, we use the Butte Loudness suite to level out this podcast. So you know, I'm personally incredibly aware of how effective the Signum Audio stuff is, but Butte and Sky are named after Scottish Islands, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. two of the many that exist around Scotland. We were sort of inspired by the natural beauty of those places. If anyone's ever been to the Highlands, you'll know what I'm talking about. You know, they've got lots of mountainous peaks, sculpted mountainous peaks, and then lots of flat moorlands. So, you know, it kind of replicates a bit of, you know, dynamics. You got high points and low points. So yeah, and very much we kind of specialize in DSP engineering, that's digital signal processing, and kind of pursue really unique algorithms that try to achieve a level of transparency that other people can't for like a really natural sound. So very much we're inspired by that natural sculpted beauty of the landscapes up here.
I have this wonderful image in my head of someone walking through the highlands of Arran or Butte or Skye and kind of looking at the mountains and looking at the troughs and kind of going, that looks like a sound wave, and then having this like epiphanous moment where he's like, I should start a company. Which I imagine I imagine it wasn't that Hollywood, but so obviously DSP is a huge market at the moment in this arena, kind of companies like Neural DSP and Aberrant DSP making plugins and specially modeled amplifiers and doing really cool collaborations with people like John Petrucci or Corey Wong. You know, where does Signum Audio's digital signal processing kind of fit into that?
Yeah, I can jump on that. Yeah, I think a lot of companies at the moment, as you mentioned, the ones you just mentioned there, I think are from Neural DSP. I've actually got one of their archetypes, and it's very, very sweet and very good sounding. Yeah, they kind of go for like modeling sort of DSP with amplifiers and effects and microphones and things, which was really great, and they execute it very well. But yeah, we kind of decided to take a more kind of jump on what Russ said with the natural beauty. We wanted to make something maybe more transparent. So this could be something that you already like the sound of the thing you've got, but you want to be able to control it or do something to it without maybe making it sound too different. You know, we can use our plugins to create transparency and keep it sounding as you like it, but controlling it. And that's kind of where our algorithms and DSP comes in.
You guys have both mentioned a lot about transparency and a lot about kind of opening up audio creation to everybody. Is that something that you felt kind of wasn't the case? Is that something that you felt was kind of kept from the masses at some points?
I think, you know, that now that people have access to a lot of plugins and DAWs and hardware that can support like a bedroom studio within, you know, a small screen, you can have like the power of a whole studio from decades ago. Not to say that like they can be compared necessarily, like, you know, analog and digital are very different things, but certainly, you know, I think like, hopefully to answer your question, that people are getting access to these tools. It is like audio creation is becoming a lot more democratized now. So in terms of like our approach to plugins, we've very much focused a lot on the user experience, the interface, like UX design. And what I mean by that is workflow. You know, when you can get free plugins, and you look at plugins back in the day, and maybe not to speak for all of them, but like they're very functional, or they try to imitate analog gear, whereas we're trying to take in a bit more of a step up approach to try and you know, let people who use our tools, they're quite easy to use, they're packed full of features, but it's nice clean interface, so you can kind of maintain that creative flow as you're working. So yeah, we very much take an approach to design our products that can be used by people who are just beginning audio and they'll understand how to use it, and professionals at the same time. There's quite a short learning curve with our tools.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I remember what it was like when I first started making music, and it was probably quite similar to a lot of people using something like Fruity Loops or something like GarageBand, and for me it was Audacity. Which I don't know if you guys remember the old school Audacity, but it was extremely difficult to use. You know, it wasn't, even though the software was there, you had to have an understanding of what you were doing before you could even think about, you know, making a song. Whereas I, at the age of kind of 14, was sitting there with my acoustic guitar playing open chords going, I want to make a record, I want to make a record. Do you think this kind of like helps people, it helps that 14-year-old kid achieve that?
Ross, do you want to go?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I'm in the same boat. I started producing music quite young, just messing about on free things. I think we had a Mac back in the day. My parents had one, and there was GarageBand on there, and I was like, oh, this is fun. But yeah, no, I think so. Like, as you said, there was definitely, like, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just fiddling around. But I feel like nowadays, especially with YouTube, so many tutorials, so many great plugins out there to like help you along your way. And that's the thing. There's actually, kind of going a little bit off topic, but a lot of the plugins now, I feel they have so much kind of help built into them. You know, it's like lots of nice presets and, you know, suggestive things that you can do that will definitely help people for sure, sort of getting started and who maybe don't have as much knowledge. So yeah, get them going. Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. I've talked previously on this podcast about with the advent of technology making it easier to, in the context of that conversation, create sample libraries, but also to create music more generally. It's often associated with a reduction in quality. But I wonder if the quality being such a subjective term is almost irrelevant. You know, good music to me is something completely different to perhaps you or perhaps, you know, my mother or your mother or whoever. You know,
yeah.
At what point do we draw the line between telling people where we as the designer think they should go with our product and allowing them to kind of create something completely different?
It's a good question. I mean, I completely agree with what you said about subjectiveness. Like I do. I mean, everyone's got different tastes, and everyone has different opinions on what they like and what is good. But yeah, it's an interesting question. It's a tough one. Russ, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you could rationalize the question in how much help should you as the developer be giving?
I see. Yeah, I think like as much help as you can give for people. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're professional or even already know quite a bit, you're gonna have the way you like to do things, and you're gonna probably be able to use the stuff fairly easily. So yeah, I think like if you're able to give help to people that are just starting off, it's worth giving.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think the reason that there's maybe a lot of subjectively different levels of quality of music is a lot to do with how you publish music. I can sit in my house, I could pick up Ableton, I could create a tune, and I can put it out on SoundCloud, and suddenly I could call it a record label, and to someone looking online who knows none of the background about that, I am a record label. I've published music, but I think like artists naturally kind of develop as they go. So you could probably look at someone they put their first track up on SoundCloud 6 years ago, and 6 years later, the actual quality of their music probably has changed. So I think it's not up to us to tell people what is good, but very much we as a company believe that dynamic audio is good, that there is a place for compression within like dance floor music and techno and all that, but there's also a place for dynamic music that's more open, and you can pick out instruments like in jazz, for instance.
It's interesting because I think about someone like Tom Misch. I don't know if you're familiar. Obviously, you mentioned jazz and you mentioned from SoundCloud. Tom Misch was a local boy to where I grew up in Greenwich in southeast London. And he went to uni to study jazz, and the entire time he was making kind of neo soul beats and putting them on SoundCloud. And it went from what was very clearly a bedroom rock star, to coin the term, to someone who is now, I think, signed to Columbia, and who kind of tours the world and makes jazz music popular. Do you think that kind of helping musicians develop in that way has kind of heralded the change in the music industry, the change in interest?
It's a difficult one. Yeah, I think maybe, yeah, for sure. I mean, this is the thing when it comes to people like himself, who's done really well and creates awesome music. I'm a big fan. End of the day, I think for someone who's like making music in their bedroom, if the music's good, regardless of the sound quality and as such, like if it's just the music's good, people like the music, that's going to kickstart them at least, and then show some interest, and then move on from there.
I was just going to say, like, I think these tools and democratizing audio production by creating these tools and giving people access to them has certainly changed it. There's a lot more you can be DIY, you can be independent now. It's not all just about the record labels and where they want to put their money. It's not about the big record labels anyway, where they want to put their money and their gigs on. It's it can let artists become big and go to places like Columbia, not where the record labels like telling them to go. I'm sure Quantic's another good example of someone who went to South America and does things a lot himself.
Absolutely. I've before working with Lute Audio, I worked with a company whose slogan was "Forever Independent." That was their entire brand ideology, was that they never wanted to be a record label. They were a record label, but they were forever independent. And I personally feel like that democratizing audio to that extent allows for that. It allows for almost this kind of like anarchism within the music industry.
I like that.
But it's interesting because you can. We're talking about jazz, but we're thinking like punks, which I personally love. I personally love the idea of kind of like a bloke with elbow patches playing a hollow body guitar being the new punk.
I was going to ask you there, did you work for the Scottish government with a slogan like that?
How do I answer this question without being political? How do I answer this question without being political? No is the short answer.
we can skim past that.
No, listen. I mean, it's not a politics show, so I won't get into a debate with it. But I think when you're talking about democracy and you're talking about the music industry, politics is, you can't avoid politics. You know, and you know, it is an interesting avenue to go down, because when you look at a lot of you know, music that comes out without label backing, it's 9 times out of 10 very, you know, blue collar. It comes from a place that isn't, you know, well funded. That's why, you know, Signum Audio does what it does, because you don't need to spend X amount of thousands of Scottish pounds to go to a studio. It's legal tender. It's legal tender. But you know, for example, like I'm from Switzerland, and an artist that has kind of taken over is a Tamil immigrant who came to Switzerland as a refugee and then moved to London as an adult, called Priya Raghu, who makes kind of Tamil-inspired dance floor music. But she could never have created the music she makes without the political experience she had of being a refugee, and without the access to the tools that were available at the price point that they are available of things like Signum Audio's products, or like Butte and like Sky. You know, is it right to disassociate ourselves from politics as musical developers and as plug-in developers?
I've never really like considered what you're saying, but it's actually really interesting what you bring up. I think it's, you can take a politics permeates every aspect of our life. And you can choose to acknowledge that, or you can choose to ignore it and be an anarchist. Even if you're an anarchist, it's political. But I think it's really interesting what you say about like new plugins and this democratization of tools and being able to get into the hands of everyone. It's a great thing because, like as you said, you highlighted that artist that's coming to Switzerland and become big. But I think it allows artists to be more authentic to themselves. Like the art they create, they have the ability, they don't need to rely on that studio time necessarily that someone else is paying for, that they need record label backing, which ultimately is a term of sponsorship, and any term of sponsorship can, without a good sponsor, kind of dictate what you're doing. So I think that's really interesting, actually. I think plugins have certainly allowed people to skip that and be true to themselves and be a bit more creative and a bit more experimental in terms of what they are producing. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, it also it allows for a bigger element of authenticity, and which kind of speaks to the brand that Signum Audio is. Signum Audio prides itself in being Scottish. You know, I make jokes, but there is something to be said for kind of Celtic heritage. I spent most of my adult life in Cornwall, so while I'm not Celtic, I understand, I can empathize. You know, do you think that the authenticity that is provided by kind of bringing audio to the people allows them to kind of rebel against that political establishment? You know, you can take the earliest examples of Bob Dylan and protest songs, and then you can kind of bring them into someone like Stormzy, who called out Boris Johnson on the stage at Glastonbury while wearing a Union Jack stab vest. You know, but Stormzy was a grime act. He was underground until he wasn't. You know, he was using plugins in the earliest days that were free or that were cheap, and artists like Stormzy can now continue to come through because of what has been kind of heralded by companies like Signum Audio.
I think actually, yeah, that's quite interesting. I'm just thinking, I'm also an event promoter and did a lot of like jungle club nights, and you look at the kind of broken beat jazz scene of the 90s, and yeah, it's kind of, there is an element of being able to fight back against the establishment. The grime scene is certainly a big example of that. I mean, dubstep was probably what was about in the noughties. I don't know what happened to that. It's personal opinion, but like the grime scene was able to kind of also flourish for a time. I think it was the mid sort of 2010s, and very much that wouldn't have been possible, and it wouldn't get the recognition that it has now without tools, without the artist being able to have those tools. Same maybe goes for like jungle and drum and bass, and dance music wouldn't be on the radios now. You know, pirate radio stations wouldn't be acknowledged. Giles Peterson might not have been acknowledged the way he is now as such a big personality in a government-funded body, had it not been for having access to the tools to create that, because the mainstream kind of probably frowned upon that kind of music at first, whereas now it's respected, and yeah, I think that's certainly down to the tools. I don't know if Ross has anything to add.
Yeah.
No, I think I completely agree. I think
Where does it go from here now? I mean, we're at a point where companies like Signum Audio are taking, you know, dynamic resolutions and taking, you know, loudness and putting it in the hands of the creator as opposed to the studio. What's the next step in democratizing audio? Where do you think we need to go from here to make it that much easier to develop yourself as an artist?
We also do a festival, the Edinburgh Festival of Sound. We did it in 2018 and in 2020, and then we're hopefully doing it in October of this year. But I think that's quite symbolic of how things need to develop. It's that because people are producing a lot in their bedrooms, I guess that it's kind of like that whole working from home aspect of thing that we're doing now. Like, there's something nice about being in the office, and there's something nice about bumping into people. And maybe that was more prominent decades ago, but maybe that's kind of getting lost now. So that's the thing about the Festival of Sound. It's like we're trying to bring together sound designers, game audio designers, music creators, you know, people from every facet of the industry into one place to meet up. And I think that's where the future lies. It's like connecting people who are developing the technology with the artists, and maybe Superbooth is another good example. There's Bristol Music Conference, you know, these kind of events that bring people together. That's where, like, that's what needs to happen more, because maybe people at the bedroom level are they're only mixing with a small group of people, or no people. They do it as a hobby at home. But I'm very much someone who's all about community and bringing ideas together to spark new ones. And certainly spatial audio is an interesting area from a technical standpoint. The hardware is supporting these more immersive audio experiences, and there's VR audio and everything. So there's certainly an interesting area arising within spatial audio.
I mean, I read recently that, I mean, this kind of returns to the kind of democratization point. I read recently that the artists are beginning to sell their songs as NFTs to fund their records, which is insane to me, because on the one hand, as someone who I'm not really in the crypto space, I'm not really into NFTs, but on the one hand, it makes sense to me, because what you're actually saying to a listener or a consumer is, you can own a part of my song. You can take your favorite artist and purchase the digital property of that song and gain, you know, a royalty from that part of the song. You know, do you kind of see this kind of collaboration that you're talking about, on the one hand, expanding further into the musical aspect and the creation process of it, but then even into the publishing and monetization of it? Do you see community being the future? or do you think that the labels are kind of too big to fail?
I think I believe that the community is the future. I mean, I don't even know if it's the future. I think it's always been there as well, but it's continually like developing. Even you see, it's interesting. You talk about how, I mean, money is important to some degree in terms of supporting someone who does want to grow and buy more tools and get more equipment and all that. And the crypto market's an interesting one. NFTs are crazy. But fair play. You know, there's kids sitting with some Ethereum they mined 10 years ago who want to support an album. That's great. But where was I going with that? Yeah, so it's interesting. I think like this connection of artists now. There's a interesting software called Endless. It's got 3 S's. Came out. I think they're still developing it, but it's kind of like giving people in different bedrooms. So like Sam, if you were in Switzerland, and Ross, if you were in Malta, and we all had our bedroom studios and MIDI devices, we could actually in real time jam with each other. So yeah, there's an interest in the like aspect of community and bringing artists together. I think it's really important to keep on and not kind of not monopolize, but like keep people in cliques. Like I'm very much.
How do they deal with the latency?
I've watched videos of it, and I think you need a fast internet.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But we have 5G.
I actually do have a friend that had spoken about, I don't know if it was that exact software, but he'd given it a shot, and I think how it works, just don't hold me to this, but as far as I'm aware, there will like the software will sync up the everything coming in, but you will probably be hearing it at different times. So it like handles the latency and then syncs it up for you. So you might be hearing it at slightly different times, but it will be in sync with the other person, if that makes sense.
That's cool. It must be impossible to stay in time though.
Well, if you the thing is, you're hearing it all sounds in time to you. You just might be the other person, for example, you might be hearing it like it all sounds in time for you as well, but we might just be hearing it all at different times, if that makes sense. So like it will sound in time for you, but you might just be like 100 milliseconds in front of me in the whole thing, if that makes sense. But yeah, don't hold me to it, but
no, 100%. It's we're coming to the end of it now, so I think to bring all of this together, it's the democratization and the kind of inherent politicization of music and of music creation and publishing and everything in between is a really interesting future for music. And so as my final question, what has Signum Audio got in the pipeline coming up, and how's it going to answer that?
Ross?
That's a good question. Well, I could definitely tell you what we've got coming up. We've actually just released our new product line called Sky after the island. And yeah, we're kind of aiming now, as Russ I think mentioned earlier, towards maybe like music production rather than post-production. So bedroom producers or up to professional level. And yeah, we're kind of aiming to bring out a line of more mixing and creative tools. So that's kind of how we're going. And just with the guys, it'll probably be similar price points to other software. And yeah, that's kind of what we've got coming up.
Fantastic. In which case, gentlemen, it has been a sincere pleasure spending the morning with you. I really want to thank you for joining me, and I recommend everyone check out Signum Audio and the Sky and Butte lines of products. And I'll see you next time.